Welcome to the webinar on web programming basics course, and today's topic is how we can use JavaBeans in JSP. This is the third topic of JSP in this course. So we will talk about the concept of JavaBean and why use JavaBean in JSP and how we can use JavaBeans in JSP and JavaBean scope. So we talked about the concept of JavaBean in Java programming course. So this is really nothing new, but for those of you who are new to the concept of JavaBean, so let's go over what is a JavaBean. So JavaBean is a Java class that can be easily used and composed together into an application. So this is basically a very simple component model. And the Java class has to follow certain very minimal design conventions in order to be qualified as a JavaBean. For example, it has a it has a set of properties, the fields, and then it does have a getter and setter methods of those properties. And the way we are going to use JavaBean is that you can create and initialize this JavaBean object, and then you can set and get values of these properties, assuming you have getter and setter methods of those properties in your JavaBean. And of course, JavaBean could contain business logic, and which could be database access logic. So the JavaBeans maintain internal properties, again, set of fields, and properties can be read and write, read only or write only, and it could be simple or indexed. Now, the property should have getter and setter method, as we talked about. Okay, so you are going to have a getter and setter method of the type of the property, and then you're going to have get and name of the property. Okay. And then setter method is the same thing. Here, setter method, you have to actually pass an object instance of that property class. And we'll see an example of that in a few minutes. And JavaBeans must have a zero argument constructor or default constructor. No arg constructor. These are all the same thing. So this is an example of JavaBean. The name of the bean is currency. And we have two properties, locale and amount, and the type of locale is locale, and the amount, the type is primitive double. So we have getter, we have the setter method for locale, set locale. By the way, one thing that you have to be really careful is that the property, the name has to start lower character, and the setter method and should have capital. Okay, so if you do not follow the convention, then you'll have some issues. Okay, and here we have setter method for the amount field or property, and then we also have a getter method for the amount. I'm sorry, the format. We also okay. So this is an example. So we have a getter method of format, but it doesn't have to be actually a field. Basically it could be some business logic that generate a string result. Okay, so getter method does not have to be always actually based on private field. Okay, so why use JavaBean in JSP? It really simplifies the usage of usage of JSP, meaning you don't have to include this Java code in your JSP page. As we talked about during the past two previous sessions, you certainly could have Java code in your JSP page using the scriptlets, but this is strongly discouraged practice because mixing up with JSP and Java code is very hard to maintain. So this is the Java code. Let's say you have to write this kind of Java code. Here, what it does is this. Suppose if you have an attribute called the cart in the session object, you're going to receive it. Okay, you're going to retrieve it. Now, if that cart attribute is not in the session object, then you are going to create one. Here, we are going to create shopping cart object, and then we are going to set it into a session object as an attribute. Okay, so this code is basically the providing shopping cart object from a session. Okay. Now the same code can be written in Java in this format. So here we are basically using the JavaBean. So for JSP colon use bean, this is a keyword, and this is the class, and this is the scope, and this is basically the name of the attribute. Okay? So the code we have seen in previous slide can be written with this one line of code if you're using JavaBean. So it's basically creating an instance of shopping cart. If none exists, stores it as an attribute in the session scope object and makes the bean available throughout the session by identify a cart. So you can use this cart to access this shopping cart object. Okay, so again, this is the same code as we have seen in the previous slide. Okay, another comparison. So yeah, so this is basically, you know, the code we have seen in 2 slides before, and this is the code that we have seen in the previous slide. So you can see how much code is in fact being saved by using JavaBean in JSP page, and besides, you're not really using Java code at all in your JSP page if you're using this option. Okay, so these are the reasons why you want to use JavaBeans in JSP page. So as I mentioned in previous slide, less need to learn Java programming language for page designers. Page designers is a lot easier to use the JavaBean format in JSP page rather than writing Java code. Strong separation between content and presentation. So here, since we are not writing any Java code, okay, we are not really creating any dynamic content from the Java code. Instead, we are actually using JavaBean, which captures this the logic inside the bean. Okay, so it's not exposed to the JSP page authors. Higher reusability of code. Because you capture things inside a JavaBean, it could be used in different pages. Simple object sharing through built-in sharing mechanism. So as you can see, it's a lot easier to use JavaBean syntax in JSP page. And convenient matching between request parameters and object properties. This is something that we are going to look into in the rest of the presentation. Okay, so how can I use JavaBean in JSP? So you have already seen how to create JavaBean object instance, right? So here, this is a bit of repeat. So you can use bean element with JSP here. And again, this is a fully qualified class name, and then you can specify the scope. Scope could be session scope or request scope, or it could be application scope, or it could be page scope, as we talked about in previous presentation. And this is the name of the bean. And you can also set property of that bean, okay, by using set property as part of this use bean element as a sub-element of use bean element. Now there are 2 different ways that you can set JavaBean properties. Okay, so again, this is using scriptlet, which is not recommended because this is Java code, right? By using set property of JSP element here, you can set the property value of a bean. So here you are going to call set property. This is a keyword, and you provide the name of the bean that is defined in JavaBean here, and then you are going to specify the property and property name, and then you can specify the value. Okay. Alright, so this bean name has to be the same name as defined in an ID attribute of useBean element, as we talked about, as I showed here. Okay. And of course, there has to be setter method for that property, okay, as we talked about. Now, these are different ways that you can use set property syntax. Okay, so simplest the syntax is that you provide the property name, and then you actually provide the literal value. Okay, so you can specify XYZ, ABC, or something like that, and that will be assigned to this property field. You can also use param value. So this, in this case, is the query parameter that is coming from the client. Okay, so it will take the query param of this name and get the value of it, and then it will set this property with a value. And this one is if the query parameter coming from the client has the same name as this property name, and that will be the parameter that will be used to to set this property. Okay, and if you use property start, that means any fields of this bean and will have suppose there are a set of query parameters coming from the client, and if the names of the query parameters are matching with any properties of this bean, those values of the query parameters will be used to set the properties. You can also specify expression here. Okay, again, this is not recommended practice. Okay, so let's just go over these things a bit more closer. So let's say if you're using set property, and then you have a name, and then you have a property. Okay, in this case, if there is a query parameter whose name is book ID, and that will be actually used to set the book ID field of the JavaBean. Okay, so in this case, the query parameter name has to be book ID, same thing as this. Okay, so this code is the same as this. With expression, so you can certainly have expression. So here we are going to evaluate this expression, and so here we are getting the locale object, and then we are getting, we are using the locale object to set this locale property of this bean. Okay, so this is the same thing as this. Okay. Moving forward, getting properties. We are going to use get property method. So it's basically convert the value of the property into string and insert the value into the current implicit out object, and retrieve the value of property without converting it into a string and insert in a So let's say an example, two different ways to get a property of a bean. Okay, so again, you have two different ways of, let's say, the getting property values. So here you are using scriptlet. Okay, so bean name and then call get property name. Again, this is not recommended practice. Instead, you can use get property element, and then you provide the name of the bean, and then you provide name of the property, and on that spot, the value of this property will be used. And so bean name must be the same as that specified for ID attribute of the use bean element, as we talked about, and there must be get property name method, meaning get a method for that property in a bean. Okay, again, that's something that we talked about. Okay, so this is a case that we are getting properties without converting into strings. So here, basically we are getting the property in the form of object. Okay, and here we are getting the property in the form of int type. Okay, so if you're using this get property element, it's always actually converted into string because you're actually printing things into a response. Okay, however, if you're using scriptlet code, you can actually capture it as an object. Okay, so let's do the demo. So we have a set of applications. So here, this is an example of using values to set the property. So let's see index.jsp page. So it's very simple code. So this is a form, and when this form is submitted, response.jsp page will be displayed. And here we have input field text and name, and then we have a submit. Okay, and response page is, so here we are instantiating JavaBean object. So the name of the bean is my bean, and the scope is request. Okay, and so this JavaBean will be available only in the processing of a single request, and the name of the bean is name handler in this package. Okay, and then we are setting the property, name property of this bean with value Steve Jobs. Okay, and then we are calling get property of this bean, and property is name. Okay, so in this case it will just display Steve Jobs, right? So let's run that application. So regardless what you entered here, it will display Steve Jobs because response page is going to set the name property field. So let's take a look at the name, name handler of the Java. This is your JavaBean. We have a name field, and then we have a getter and setter method of the name field. Okay, so in response.jsp page, we are setting the name field with the Steve Jobs regardless, right? Okay, so that's why I use the Steve Jobs. Now let's take a look at the second example. In this case, index.jsp page is the same response.jsp page. However, in this case, we are going to use param attribute instead of value attribute. What it means is that if there is a query parameter whose name is name1, we are going to take the value of it and then we will set the name. Okay, so let's take a look at index.jsp page. Okay, all right, so let's run this application. So let's say it's Sang, then okay, then it will display Sang because the here the query parameter is actually set as name equals Sang. Okay, so it will take this query parameter, which is specified in the response. So if you actually see response page, it is actually taking that name1, okay, the value, and then it will get the value of it and will set this name property. Okay, let's see, the third one is the default. So let's see, so in this case response.jsp page is, so it doesn't say anything, right? So it doesn't say, the param, it doesn't say the value. So in this case, if there is a query parameter whose name happened to be name, then it will take the value of that query parameter and set the property of this name. Okay, if there is none, then it will not be set. Okay, all right. So here, so in this case, this is actually name, right? So in our previous case, if you actually see, I didn't think I actually emphasized it. So here, the query parameter is actually basically name1, right? Okay. All right. So let's run this application. So this one should work pretty much the same, xxx, and then you should actually return xxx. Okay, because this time name of the query parameter is a name, and that's what we specified in the response page. Okay, property. Okay, all right. Next one is wildcard. So in this case, we are using wildcards. So let's see the response.jsp page. So here we have the wildcard. So set property mybean and property star. Okay. So in this case, we have two fields. coming from index.jsp page. So if you actually take a look at the index.jsp page, we have the name field and we have an age field, and the query parameter is going to be name and age. Okay, and so let's so in this case it's actually set as 99 initially, but you can change it. So let's run this application. So name is, let's say, Johnny, and age is 89. Okay, and all right, and then it will say, hey, hello Johnny, and your name is 89, because we are using in response page and the star. Okay, so it will basically take all the parameters, query parameters coming from the client, and it will see whether there are any fields or properties in the JavaBean that matches those query parameters. In this case, we have two, right? So both of them will be taken and will be used to set the properties. Okay, so that's wildcard. Expression. So in response.jsp page, so here we are using, so let's create another bean so that we can actually use the getName the method of that bean. So I created another bean called the myBean2, and again it's a request scope, and this is name handler 2, and it has same code as a name handler. It has a name property, and that's set the value is set to Bill Clinton. Okay, and then we have myBean. Okay, and in request scope, so we have two bean objects that are being maintained in the request scope. Okay, and the class is name handler. So in this case, what we want to do is we are going to use expression here. So we are basically calling getName method of the bean2 that we have created here, and in this case it will return Bill Clinton, right? And that is the value that will set this name field. Okay, all right. So let's run expression. Okay, so I'll just use my name here. Okay, and it will return Bill Clinton because that's what we set. Okay, so that is the end of the demo. Very simple exercises. JavaBean scope. Yeah, so we talked about this scope concept before, right? So it could be application scope, it could be session scope, it could be request scope, or it could be page scope. And the page scope is the smallest scope, that's per page. And request scope is that it's actually being shared by servlets and JSP pages as long as they are handling a single request. Session scope object, the attributes that are maintained in the second session scope, being accessible to any servlet and JSP pages as long as they are being accessed from a single user. And web context scope, attributes in web context scopes are available to any client as long as that is running in a single same application. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation. A very simple presentation and concept. So let me